Greg Simpson works for me. He's a consultant and for us and full time. And he had a family emergency and he couldn't come, so he handed me a jump drive and said, "Help me out." So we'll see how it goes here. We farm. My son Ryan is there on the left. We farm in Mississippi County, Arkansas, an hour north of Memphis, hour east of Jonesboro. Ryan just got through doing a row rice talk in this room a while ago. Some of y'all might have heard that, but anyway, Greg was asked to do something on Instar, and we've incorporated in with our and got all of our fields Instar grid sample, and we're trying to put all of our fertilizer out, all our urea out pre-flood as much as possible, and then adding some later for a boot application if we feel like we need to. So we've got everything grid sampled and across the whole farm, and then we're doing all the irrigation studies with Dr. Reba and ARS team out of Jonesboro. And all the stuff we're doing is we're documenting with our equipment, all of our John Deere equipment, recording trips across the field and all the inputs, and so we got a good record-keeping system. And the winter flooding for ducks, we've gotten into that pretty heavy. We've got an RCPP contract with NRCS. It's worked out really well. And then we do the scouting thing and a lot of the other stuff we're doing that I think is cutting edge, and we've been called guinea pigs at times, and I think glad to cooperate with the researchers. So one of the things we've done, we started a couple of years ago, doing our Instar soil sampling, and we send those to Fayetteville, and we get the results back. And we've started the last couple of years. We put all of our fertilizer out with 2 John Deere spreader rigs, and they're able to get variable rate. Of course, on urea we don't do the variable rate, but we're able to dial the Instar N recommendation into the machines, and so when they hit a certain field, whatever that Instar rate's calling for, it knows what to put out at what amount. So we pre-program that into the machines, and we basically split the swath width with our fertilizer rigs to keep the streaking from going on. So like in a normal situation, we'll put out just say that 140, like one of the slides we did earlier, we put out 144 pounds of urea out with both rigs, and so we're cutting the swath width down, and that's really the only way we can, and it's really worked out well. The first year we tried it, John Deere said we could just spread the normal 90 feet, and you know, it works if everything's perfect and the wind's not blowing, and you get, yeah. So anyway, the first year we decided we couldn't live with that, so we had to end up getting another rig, and so we're double applying the fertilizer, but it has really worked out well. I've really been pleased at how uniform it is, and so anyway, one of the misconceptions about Instar is that it does not normally recommend as much fertilizer as we would normally put out, which is not the case. We've grid sampled the whole farm, basically 13,000 acres, and you see the rice that we're going to plant this year. See if I can figure that pointer out. There we go. So that right there shows that we're actually recommending, the Instar rates are recommending 3% more than the traditional 300 pounds of urea is what we would normally put out on a pre-flood situation. If we didn't have the Instar rate, that's pretty well what we would normally put out. And so some fields are as low as 90 pounds to the acre, and some are as high as 190. So, and there's no rhyme or reason for that, so I don't. and Trent Roberts with the university has done multiple tests, and you see his folks here doing the different rates and timing and all this kind of stuff. So they're taking it all the way to harvest, and you'll see some slides here in a minute. But the general perception is that it costs for less. And so when you take the whole ball of wax and run it across the whole farm, you know, it's actually calling for a little bit more. So so we tested all 300 fields, and that just tells what I just said. So one of the things that I feel like we've been missing is, besides just our eyeballs telling us, well, since we just put it all out on the front end, you know, are we running low? You know, Amy, I don't know. There's a big, I get a discrepancy, and y'all give me some feedback here from Rice Tech. I don't know if there's any Rice Tech people in here, but anyway, I've been told that if you put your urea out on dry ground and you water it in, that you know, it's going to take up all that within 3 weeks. And the only reason to put a boot application out is because you may get a milling increase, and it may help your straw strength. That's 2 big mays right there that, you know, we've been trying the last few years to just put it all out pre-flood, but I'm not really totally comfortable with that, and I think we need to start doing some strip trials and trying to figure out, you know, exactly how much are we helping ourselves with that boot application. What are y'all's thoughts about that? I'll just open this up just a second. As far as putting all your fertilizer out on the front end.
You know, we do have some folks that are doing that in my area. I'm in Mississippi. We do have a lot of folks that are they're leading off that boot application. They're going to a mid-season application just due to, we were seeing it run out in a lot of cases early. But, generally, it's in a case-by-case scenario. I don't know of a lot of folks going all in on the front end, y'all.
No, we've shown for probably the last 25 years that we can do everything up front in a small plot and make it work every time. But when you get out in the real world, everything, you know, I can manage an acre of rice a lot easier and timely than you can manage 5,000 acres of rice.
Okay.
You know, so that's where I think those second and third applications come into play more in the real world.
Well, some of what I'm saying, it might answer this, is instead of putting that heading shot, sometimes we move it, like I've had
Back to
had it on
traditional
some real
time.
sandy ground, it will start to look, you know, put it earlier. If I don't need it, I just kind of play it. But, you know, like Whitney said, basically anywhere between that mid-season and the heading,
That's correct.
Normally, not all consistent, you know, probably gonna work all right.
Right, that's correct. And that's what I was saying. We got a lot of folks moving it up more, you know, before that boot split timing. You know, so.
Do y'all feel like we're actually adding bushels, or just making it look pretty? Or, I mean, do you feel like, have you done any side by side? That's my problem, is when I get to asking the real experts and trying to pin them down, you know, and they say, well, you know, are we adding bushels here because the head's already been determined way back when? You know, is it putting another grain on that panicle? Is it, what are we doing here?
Right.
And so I'm not saying I got the answer at all. I mean, we didn't have as good a rice yields last year, and I don't think a lot of people did either. But I got some slides here. It's going to show. You may want to argue to say that, you know, there's no way that 90 pounds of N could make a normal rice crop. Well, we did some strip trials, and I'll show you here in a minute that I'm not sure that if you go by that 1 year, we didn't help ourselves by putting a massive amount of N out according to yield maps. But the Green Seeker is a new tool, I think, that we could probably, instead of just driving by it and saying, well, you know, do I need it or not use it, use something like that. I mean, what are y'all's thoughts on that? Is that
I use the Green Seeker mainly on my conventional varieties in the rice verification program in South Arkansas. But of course, Jared lets us, on the hybrids, we still stay with the late boot. But it just depends on field-to-field basis whether we leave off the mid-season or not. It's all according to the Green Seeker. It depends on how good of a pre-flood
How good you got to work.
incorporation that we got on our pre-flood incorporated. If we got our pre-flood incorporated real well, we're in pretty good shape as far as mid-season. We can leave it all.
Yeah. Well, what do y'all feel like we're doing with the boot application? Do you actually feel like we're adding bushels, or what are we doing there?
I don't think you're necessarily adding bushels at that point. You're probably giving yourself more straw strength, would be my opinion. But one reason I think that you're getting by with putting it all up front, because if I understand from what your son said a while ago, you're in a pretty good rotation program, right? Am I right in
Right.
understanding that? I think in your type ground, because I scout right across the state line a lot, we're not giving enough emphasis to, if you make good beans, you gotta credit that ground.
Right.
And I don't think we're doing that enough, and I don't think that's being looked at enough based on soil type. But I think in my heavy clays that I work just right across the state line from you, if they make 40 bushel beans, I'm crediting 30 units.
Right.
30, knocking 30 right off, and I go with 90 pounds, followed by one mid-season application. On the hybrids, I try not to do it right at mid-season time, I try to wait a little bit, and it's from a straw strength standpoint, in my view.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really increasing yield as much as it's allowing it to stand better for me
Yeah.
on those heavy clays.
Yeah.
I'm with Rice Tech in South Louisiana, and I generally tell my customers, if you're able to put a mid-season extreme grain ring nitrogen application on a hybrid and it doesn't lodge, then you're probably robbing yourself in yield from not putting enough pretty up front. So, and then what we see in our data is that in years where we have rough milling environment, that late boot application helps stabilize that milling yield.
Right. Well, I'm to the point now with $4 and whatever cent rice. I mean, I struggle to spend an extra 100,000 when we're talking about as many acres as we are, because I say, okay, if I write this check for 100,000, am I going to get 100,000 back? That's what. Yes,
Are you
sir.
saving the bushels?
Sir,
Are you saving the bushels by making that application?
saving.
Another question.
Oh.
Instead of making extra, are you saving what you got?
Right. Well, that lodging thing is huge. I mean, we all know what
It's
that
a
would
bad
be.
problem. It's a bad problem, but I think probably if you would look at your soybean, because I know you make good soybeans, if you would just look at that maybe on one of your fields.
Right.
And if that could save you part of your upfront, if you are gonna split it,
Right.
Every little bit's gonna help this time.
Right. I agree. Okay. I'm learning from y'all. I'm not. Okay. Here's a good example right here of where we said, okay, we don't know if it's Instar's worth a hoot or not. What are we doing here? So we put the ground rigs and did these different rates, amount of in here. So it's okay if nitrogen is an issue, obviously doubling the rate right here, we should see a response over here with the yield maps. We don't. And we did this over multiple tests because we're trying to, we're getting a lot of, and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot here, but there's a lot of people that think that Instar's not worth a hoot. And I'm here to say that I'm not sure, but we're doing a lot of tests and trying to verify in our mind exactly. It makes sense to me if the soil tests are right. I mean, it tells me that we're treating every field as a separate deal. So anyway, that's been interesting because we should see obviously a pattern here if we double the fertilizer. And you can see it visually. I mean, you could, to your eye, you'd say, well, that's going to make a lot better rice. But it didn't. Okay, this is just an example where we did the Instar on all these fields, and this is just the amount of urea that it's calling for. So, these are all similar fields, but I can't, that's so small, I can't see some of those, but one of these over in here just called for 90 pounds of N. And, but the takeaway from this is we're not saving any fertilizer, but it's calling for different amounts in every field according to the and so all of our rigs have this plugged in. When it pulls in this field right here, it's putting 359 pounds. Actually, we're dividing that by 2, so it's 180, 130, whatever it is, half of that. So it's put out with each rig. So we're splitting the swath, and that's the rigs that we're using. And like I said, we had to start cutting the swath width in half. Now this is some of the trial stuff that my son did on the row rice a while ago. Trent Roberts from University at Fayetteville did this, and so some of y'all were here a while ago, you could see this. So this is a flood irrigated furrow trial, but this is the lower end of the field, and this is the upper end of the field. And so if you see the difference between the nitrogen, the yield, there's a lower yield on the upper end, and I'm not going to get into the row rice thing, but we're tweaking that. So this shows that on the flooded end, the lower end, the amount of 140 units of N were it maxed out, but it took 225 units of N on the trial on the lower end of the field. So the lower end was actually had water backed up on it after we started to flood. And so it backed up, and it was a normal flooded environment. Okay. So the continuous flood obviously is the best and most efficient for the nitrogen. And so the non-flooded end, according to this one test, required 85 more units of N. And if you set through the row rice thing, we added an extra 100 pounds of urea on the upper end, the upper third. And the question is, and we all have this question right now, with our ground rigs, on the row rice, can we go in there and not put as much on the front end and just program those machines to where if we're supposed to be putting out 300 pounds on a normal field, do we put out half of that on the upper end with the idea that we know we need to come back and spoon feed it with the airplane because we've lost it in where it's not flooded on the row rice? Or the other option is, do you put out more on the front end knowing that you're going to lose some of that on the front end, or you just wasting it if you throw it out there? Give me some feedback on that.
Are you not on the top end a while ago when he was saying that you come back in and stuff? Did you not put agritane across the top end of that field as well?
Yeah.
I would say that you need to split it and put it closer together before mid-season on the top end.
Okay.
But according to what you said last time, it wasn't any different across all of them, right?
Yeah, that was
eye-opening.
I wish I had a slide because, you would think that on the small plot stuff it was, and that's what we're talking about, Bobby, small plot doesn't, but the actual full yield map on the whole row rice field, you could not see any difference between the upper end and the lower end. And it cut 190 something bushels to the acre. And
maybe I missed something here. You're talking about you're putting all your fertilizer out, like your 120 on a hybrid, you're putting 120 out, and then you come back, like we were saying, at Boot or whenever with your other, and that's all you're doing on your row rice?
on the row rice, we did not come back with anything else except on the top third of the field where, see, when we're.
Well, I've done a considerable amount of row rice, and I'm in Blue Hill, Missouri.
He did more
I've got a
than
little.
Wendell, so
Okay.
Wendell started him, but he should have talked to him.
Okay.
I've coached him up a little. Anyway, I've done it on a lot of different soil types, and of course, like everything else, I've done enough acres so nothing's set in stone at all. But I have kind of come up with a method that works for me, whether it's hybrid or conventional, and I never put out the whole thing up front. Like on the hybrid, I've started using like 80 units, and I'll come back, I just say like 2 weeks, and I come back and fly 100 pounds on, because you're gonna lose some. It's not in that anaerobic condition, you know, and stuff, and so I spoon feed it a little bit. I'm still old school on conventional stuff. I'm one of the only guys there that still flies 2 mid-seasons, and I put 75, so I'm normally putting, I figure out how much total in I want
Yeah.
on, let's say, a variety like 111.
Yeah.
And I'll put that out and so much out, and then I come back in about 2 weeks and I fly on 100 pounds, and then I come back usually about 2 weeks after that. I'm getting right at, you know, green ring or starting to move a little. I put about 75 pounds, and 7, 10 days I put another 75 pounds. So I've got 4 trips over it, you know. I do have more, I've got at least 1 extra trip than about anybody, but I've also had some of my best yields have been on row rides. Now, the very top 4th of the field sometimes seems to be my less yield. And I'm thinking that's because just the water runs there so much, you know, it runs it. The highest field, the highest part in the yielding part of the field, almost always, probably 75, 80% of the time, will be right at that water line where the water just stays wet, right in there. The flooded part will actually go down just a little. It'll be higher above that, and it'll be a little lower than that at the top of the pipe.
Is that because you're holding too deep of water on the lower end?
We try not to hold it too deep. I've had some trying to hold it deep, just backing it up far as they can. I said, don't worry about that. If it's a pretty good slope and you don't back it very far, don't worry about that. So over time, you know, we've done a lot of adjusting. You know, we're still doing a lot of adjusting, but that's kind of what I've found on it. That it just have to, I don't really put much more total on it. I just scattered out a little more.
Well, the really confusing thing and reason why we started leaning towards putting more, basically all of it on the front end, is visually, when you don't have any streaking, when you put it out correct on the front end, and you put it out on dry ground, you put agritane on it, and it's watered in, and you never visually see that rice is ever hurting for anything. I mean, when my eyes, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I can usually tell or think that I need, but, you know, I don't. So it's hard for me to call that airplane and put another 100 pounds on just because Rice Tech says we may help lodging, we may help milling, because that's something, that's $100,000. And so I guess if we had $7 rice, it'd be a whole lot easier to call that airplane. So.
Well, I think you also have to back up whether you do or don't do it with some tissue samples, at least somewhere in your group of fields at that, to see how your plants are.
Right.
Because visually, the older we get, first of all, and second of all, a lot of these varieties look very different. And from a farmer's perspective, they want everything dark green. And everything dark green does not mean money in the end.
That means lay down.
It means lay down, or it might actually mean you're cutting your yield. You're actually going backwards. There's a point that you're actually hurting yourself by too much.
Well, what do you think about green seeker versus tissue?
I've never used it, so I don't have an opinion.
What do you have?
For once in a while.
We used the tissue samples too, and it did show we needed to put that 100 pounds on that upper third of the field.
Yeah.
But as far as the green seeker, I don't use it on the hybrid fields, because Jared keeps me off the hybrid fields with the green seeker. I use it on my conventional fields.
And if you look at most of the, just going back to the history of when we started looking at green seeker on rice back 7, 8 years ago, when it was this big monstrosity you had to take through the field.
Yeah.
Most of the logarithms for that green seeker model were built on conventional rice.
Okay.
Which there's a logarithm for each variety too.
Yeah, because each variety's got a different color. It all can go all the way back to what they do in the Philippines with their color chart.
Yeah.
This variety's gonna be this different color green.
So back to the row rice, do you feel like that, do you have farmers that are whole hog 100% to it? I mean, do you have any reservations about, because we're fixing to jump off into 800 acres this time, and there's a lot of people watching, and we just did a couple of fields, but, you know, I've got a couple of landlords that are a little bit nervous.
I'm not near as nervous about it as I used to be. I'm not gonna say anything's gonna work every time, because I've seen the perfect stuff flop on you, but I've got a few guys that are 100% for irrigated rice. And they wanna stay that way.
You
And
couldn't
they're
talk- you
making,
couldn't
they're
talk-
making, they're making as good a rice as they've ever made, for the most part. Now, I'm not gonna say we don't have a disaster going on or something go wrong,
You couldn't ever talk them into pulling levies again.
but I don't think so.
Wow. And we could get rid of some knuckleheads, y'all, some of y'all were in that presentation.
Well, in the boot hill, they have spent a fortune. This man right here will tell you that grading ground is, there's no telling how much money they spent putting laser grading ground. And I still say if you've got like an 80-acre field and you've got it laser graded and you've got 4 or 5 levees across it, that's not a row rice field in my opinion. Put you 3 or 4 levees across it, that's not that much. But they don't like levees and unleveling their ground. That's the major thing they're after. My one guy that's probably been in rice longer than any, I cannot get him to put a tail levee and catch water. Now, he's got a couple where he's got a weir box and he just stops it and that's fine, but he won't put a levee down there.
Yeah.
And he's using the same beds, he's on 36-inch rows, and his beds are so tall, I have to ride my 4-wheeler on top of them because they'll drag the top, though I get high centers on them. And most people don't want it, but just tall enough to get water, and he wants them up there. But he's using the same beds now for like 8 years. We've not ever torn the beds down.
Wow.
He just kind of reruns them and burns down and reruns and goes
So,
again.
where you put out your 4 shots of fertilizer on this row water rice, what would you say your average yield is on, say, 753?
753 is probably, I'm gonna say average has been in our area, what, 180? I had some this year that was 220 or something. I also had some that didn't struggle to make 140. And some of that 140 and 200 was in water rice, some of that was in flooded rice and not, it didn't seem to make a difference what I'm trying to say. It wasn't that it was furrow irrigated or flooded, it wasn't that.
It was a nighttime
It was,
temperature.
yeah.
Yeah, every year we get an attitude adjustment. We think we got this thing figured out, and then.
And I've told every farmer I've got and everyone that calls me and asks me about it that we may get one of those years when it's so hot and dry, you can't pump enough water down that road. And we have some white ground that's real white, tight clay, and some of those old cut spots that are really cut and want to grow grass. My brother's got on 30-inch rows, and there'll be a little strip about that wide right down the middle that still burns up. Water runs down both sides of it. And we use a product called ACT, or Agra SC is about the same thing. I'm not big on, can I say this, good produce, snake oils or stuff, but it helps wick it a little bit. And it's more or less a surfactant, is what it is, and it's like $5 an acre. You put it in with something else, so it's not a big expense. And I use that on almost all of them. Most fields, so.
Well,
But those cut places that burn up are more or less, like say in a 40-acre field, you might have a 4 or 5 acre spot that burns up the strip. So, what percentage have you actually lost? We've done that when my brother started doing it. Some is because some of that ground, it's been beaten to death and it won't grow corn. It's just too sorry a ground. And they're not making 200 bushel rice on that, but they're making decent rice. Now, when rice is $4, maybe that's not the time to do that. But they can turn around and make a better bean crop behind it, rotate with the rice.
Well, this is a really good conference, because I think, this feedback, I think, as a farmer, to me, is invaluable. To get the researchers and the farmers, the knuckleheads, up here trying to, because I've always said I learn more from y'all and my neighbors than I do from myself. And, we got to figure out different ways to do things. There's no, and my son coming back is refreshing, because he says, Dad, just because we've been doing it this way, why are we doing it this way, and why can't we try this? And so I've given him a little bit of rope, and so I don't know whether that's it or not. Yep, a lot of thank yous there, and a lot of people that we couldn't do what we're doing without all these support people behind us. And all you research people, thank you for all you do in all the different states, because Rice Tech couldn't do it without y'all. And y'all couldn't do it without us either, right? All right, that's it. Bobby, you got?
Yeah, get up and do something for